12th. So last week we did Roman letters, right? All right. So today I want to do it's almost like we are traveling through history. What I showed you last week was the almost like the beginning of the alphabet as we know it today. But it has gone through several changes in the 2000 year, 2500 year history of just this Latin alphabet itself. So there have been alphabets from maybe 3500 years before that also, but they were like the earlier forms of what became colloquial letters for us. So in the time after, say, 800 AD, the most of Europe had a whole lot of, I guess, the alphabet spread all over thanks to the work of King Charlemagne, who is also called Charles the First. He's actually the father of Europe. I never even knew that. And the story is very cute in the fact that, at least as far as lettering is concerned, I have a feeling he was a very brutal warrior. You would have to be that if you wanted to become like the father of Europe. So he conquered a large part of Europe after the decline of the Roman Empire, and he admired the Roman Empire, and he felt that one of the factors that kept them as the imperialists at that point was the fact that they had a written language, and through the shape and form of the language, everyone knew that these guys are your overlords. And he felt that he also needed to have that something of that kind of system. But what by the time that he became king, scripts were used in some form or another all over Europe, and they were all very disparate. So imagine you take a beautifully written edict and go from say Germany to Italy, and everybody just looks at you and says, "We don't know what you're saying." So he thought that it's not going to work unless everyone knows the script. So he took the services of recruited this monk called Algonquin, who was an English monk, and he said, "You're very learned and everything, so I want you to find a way that everyone can understand the same language. So how do we do that?" So Algonquin went around Europe and collected lettering samples, and then over some years, he came up with a script called Carolingian script. So this script had what today we might feel is like a cursive hand. So it's not just capitals. This is where you start seeing scripts that have a capital letter and minuscule letters, and there are certain rules that are built in. So things like writing in paragraphs and all this was all everyone was just making up these rules according to their application. So from 800 AD onwards, the letters just spread all over, and one of the most wonderful remnants of the Dark Ages, ironically speaking, are beautiful calligraphy. Because during that time there was such power on with the church that they promoted making these Bibles and Book of Hours, books of Psalms, and promoted the idea that rich people should have these. Wherever there were churches, they should have these books, and not just a book like any ragtag book. These books were elaborate. They were made of vellum, which is treated calf skin. And imagine that skin also had to go through maybe 10 different stages to be able to come to a point where you could write on it. The inks were very specialized. They were made from something called iron gall or ox gall. So ox gall is an ink derived from like a tumorous growth in oak trees. So they harvest that ball and then they process it and they extract a very dark colored ink, which eventually then everyone calls ox gall. It has nothing to do with ox, it's just that the word oak became ox, and iron gall. And these inks would actually erode into the calf skin. That is why when you have some books from even 900 years old, the text is pristine. It has almost tattooed into the skin of the calf. Today, these inks are still available, but if you try writing with them with a steel nib, in one use, your steel nib is completely corroded. You cannot use it more than that. So, people who use these inks often work with a quill. So, there's something about the cellulose of the quill that does not erode with the acidity of these gall inks. So some of the scripts that were written at that time were written with this material. Now, the reason why I'm explaining all of this to you is because when you use these scripts, the Gothic scripts, you will, there's a reason why it is made or designed like that. And if you know the reason, you will always design your letters with that built-in purpose. So one purpose was that, of course, this was all devotional. So you would have a lot of hymns or maybe devotional text written in this. You would not have people writing letters to each other in this script. You just couldn't afford it. There was no paper. Then also, because vellum was so expensive, this script is very tight. All the letters are very close to each other, and they're built in such a way that they almost sit within the negative space of each other. So they're absolutely fascinating. Now, if we don't know this history, we'll end up making our script very wide because we've got all the paper that we need. So then it becomes a task to relearn and think of a time when you had just one paper and you had to work on that paper for a week. It had to be that slow and careful. So what I'm going to show you is the script that was used in these books. It is called a Gothic script, but Gothic script is an umbrella term. There are a number of scripts that fall under the Gothic scripts. It's largely scripts that were used from 800 AD to about 1400 AD. And these were scripts that were used mostly in Western Europe. So you would have scripts like what are called textura quadrata, textualis, Schwabaker, there's a Bathard script, and all of these are different scripts because there are few variations in their form. So I'm going to give you a very generic script, which is none of these, but also is like an introduction to all of these scripts. So we are going to start off with me explaining a few terms to you, so you know how you can pick up these scripts by yourself. I will not be able to show you the whole script in today's class, but I want to show you the basics by which, if you get an exemplar of all the letters, you will be able to make it yourself. Now, also remember that this script was used by technically illiterate people. They weren't technologically very savvy. They didn't go to schools. They just got up one day, decided, okay, my older son can go to a monastery because there he'll get some food. Send him to a monastery. The poor chap has no choice but to become an apprentice and learn how to read and write. So the purpose is not like today where education was important. So there are many ways in which the script can be written, and you are allowed to figure out your own ways to do this thing. It is not like a hard and fast rule that only this is done or only that is done. So if you find ways in which you can use these rules but find your own techniques to make it easier for you, go ahead and do that. I want you to feel that this is very free. It is not, the rules are just basic guidelines, but you have a lot of freedom to experiment with these letters. Right, so we are going to start off with making a few guidelines. So I want you to choose a pen with which you're going to write, and we're going to do most of the alphabet with that. But yeah, before that, I just want you to see this measurement, the scale that I'm going to make, in a few terms that I will explain to you. All right, so in the time that these Gothic scripts were written, you did not have sophisticated scales or measures like that. Usually, a paper size would come to you, um, and you would then make certain marks on the paper depending upon the size of your pen or your quill. Also, quills were carved according to whatever material they had handy. So now let's assume that we have this pen handy. It has a certain width. And if I want my letters to look exactly the same proportion throughout the book, I have to create some kind of scale for the letters. So this scale is created using the width of your pen's tip as a unit measure. So let me explain how that works. I'm going to start off with drawing a line on which I'm going to draw 3 different scales. I just want you to observe this. You don't have to make this, and I'll share the pictures with you later so you can have it handy. So I'm going to use the flat edge of my pen and make just horizontal lines like that. I'll make these on either side in such a way that they're stacking one on top of the other and there's no overlap. This gives me a measure of the space in terms of the width of the pen. So this is called pen widths. Now using the pen, I have made a scale of 7 pen widths. If I were to change my pen, for this I will make a new scale. And as you can see, the moment you change the width of the pen, the scale changes. So why is the scale important? The current letters that we are going to write are going to be written across 5 pen widths. So I'm going to make these lines and I'm going to show you the difference. If I were to draw a baseline and what's called an X line, I'm going to give you all this terminology also. So obviously the height of the red marks is going to be different and height of the black marks is going to be different. And if I make a shape, the shape of an O over here, with the red pen it looks like this. If I make it with a black pen, it's going to look very different. The proportion is all really off. But if I make it here, then these two look like they are the same proportion. So the best way to maintain the exact same proportion is to always adhere to a scale. Now each letter form, like each script, has its own proportion. So this is now a baseline. Sorry. I hope this writes. Oh, 1 second. So the terms we have to keep in mind are baseline, which is the line on which the letters will all sit. So in the case of the black O, this is the baseline. And in terms of, and for the red letter, this is the baseline. Then you have the X line. Why it is called the X line, no one knows. That is the line up to which point the minuscule letters will come. Okay? And the distance between the two, that is called the X height. So the X height is always measured in terms of pen widths. So in this case, in both these letters, the X height is 5 pen widths. That is your X height. And for the Gothic script that we are doing today, we will have an ascender space and a descender space. Oh, I could have had it here. The ascender space is 2 pen widths as well as the descender. So this means that if I want to make an ascender and descender, I have to add 2 pen widths to the top and the bottom. Okay, this is the ascender space, this is the descender space. And the way our letters will look would be like this. This is the ascender. And this is the descender. Okay, right, so we got ascender, descender space. So now let's start making these marks. So what I want you to do is just make a short line from the top. But if you have a scale, the best thing to do is to mark a point from the top, and from there, like I marked it at 7 centimeters from the top, and I'm just going to draw a line on which I'm going to make these pen widths one below the other. So starting from top, we will make 9 pen widths, a height of 9 pen widths, so that we accommodate the X height, ascender space and descender space. And you just count the alternates. So you have 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. Okay. Now I know that my pen is 3 mm. So this is going to be 2.5 centimeters. But we have to imagine a time when we did not have this measuring scale. So in the past, in a scriptorium where books were made, you would have about 8 or 10 people working on a book at a time. And all these people would be, there was one person whose job it was to just make the lines on the paper. These lines were usually made using a blunt instrument, like maybe I have used a toothpick sometimes, but it used to be like a butter knife, if you can imagine a butter knife. So where we have to draw these lines in pencil, they would use that butter knife, use a piece of thread, and then just draw that line with the butter knife. So that would indent the paper. I don't know if you guys know, but pencils were also invented only in the 18th century. We did not have pencils before that. So usually these things were marked with either charcoal, but then charcoal can be very messy. So you had to find ways in which you did not leave that mess on the paper. Alright, so now I marked 4 lines. You have a base line over here. I'm going to write here baseline. X line, ascender line, descender line. And the first thing we have to do is to know how to make this line. So when working with an oblique pen, not oblique pen, sorry, a broad edge pen, the trick is to maintain a particular angle at which you hold the pen, and that angle is somewhere around 42 to 45 degrees. So if you're working with a chisel pen like this, then this is already at an angle. The pen tip is already cut at an angle. So you hold the pen like this, where the longer side is towards your thumb and the shorter side is towards your index finger. And you position the pen in such a way that if you make a line at 45 degrees going up, you get the thinnest line possible, and 45 degrees down, you get the fattest line possible. So this is the first practice that you can do. Now I've made this in red ink just to demonstrate, but in black ink, this is how it will look. So I'm using the smallest space. Thinnest, fattest, thinnest, fattest. And you can keep making these shapes till you get nice sharp tips at the top and bottom, and you can maintain the angle. The next exercise you do is maintaining this angle again. You draw a straight line down. Now this can be a little tricky because the moment you see that teda, the crooked angle, we tend to make the line going towards the right. That comes very easy. But we have to make this line such that you get a sharp edge that is longer on the top right and bottom left. And all these lines have different thicknesses. The angular lines have a very thin and very thick line, and the vertical lines are less thick than that. And then we have a series of horizontal lines which will again be slightly thicker than the vertical lines. That is the intention. We need to have all these varied thicknesses to make our letters look pretty. Alright, so the first letter we will make will be the letter I, and this is how you make it. These are the three shapes you will use. A diamond shape, which is just a small dash made at 45 degrees downwards, the same length as the width of your pen. Then behind that, you go back on top of it and you make a vertical line in such a way that part of that diamond shape is sticking out from the right and the left. Then again overlap that with another diamond shape, and then just with the left tip of your pen you will make a hairline shape coming up and a gentle shape like that going down for the letter I. Now if you're working on our drawing paper and you're working with felt tipped pens, then don't put too much pressure, because every time you keep your hand on the paper, that felt tip is going to keep bleeding onto your sheet. So make quick strokes, make that stroke, lift the pen. And you can do this as slowly as you want. Then if we do this twice and we join them, we get the letter U. But you have to keep the space between the letter or within the letter just about the thickness of the stroke itself. So the whole script is proportioned in such a way that this thickness of your letter or your pen is the thickness you will leave within the letter. All these are equal. And that's the practice that we need to do. So they can't become too wide, they can't become too narrow. My U has become a little narrow. I think I need my other glasses. Now if we make this 3 times, this is the letter W. I think it can come slightly lower. When you see these letters, you probably will not be able to tell how to make these letters. So, in most books on lettering, especially these old letters, you will find something that's called a ductus. So, a ductus is a sequence of arrows and numbers which gives you some idea of how to make the strokes. So in the case of W, I will have one arrow down, and then I'll have 1, 2, 3. There will be a 4 given here, and so on and so forth. So I will be sharing with you a few ductus which you can use to practice these letters. Now try making the letter V yourselves. That's the second part of W. Don't make this part, just make this. So it will look like this. Oh, I don't know why this is stopping so high. Anyway, this would be my style if I were a scribe in ancient times. Okay, are you with me? Alright, now we'll write 2 more letters. This is the M. So I make my stem first. A second stem. Third stem. And a foot. This is M. And if I just make 2 stems and a foot, that becomes my N. So can you notice how there is this very lovely silhouette of a zigzag line happening in the top and the bottom? And this negative space is what would be the beauty of this letter form. So one of the first things that you will always do, whichever script you're learning, is write the word minimum. I want you to just observe this, okay? I'm going to try to not talk through this. Okay, so this is how the letters have to be written. And the goal of writing these letters in this way is that if I were to hide this part and this part, everything should look even. They should just look like bars, and you will not be able to tell which letter is which. So, this is a complete antithesis of how we do lettering today. Where if you cannot read a word immediately, that means you have bad handwriting. So, for all the people who feel that what is the point in writing something that is so illegible, the point is that this is only going to be written in places where you will have the luxury of time to spend on the letters to really enjoy the beauty of the shapes. This is not going to be an exit sign or a road sign where instead of reading Bangalore, you're going to read something else and then land up somewhere else. So every place has a different lettering. So if you're going to work on your journal, let's say if you have gone to Germany, where this script was very, very, very popular, and you want to write something about there, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, that entire region, if you can write it in this script, it makes all the difference to all the lovely castles and all you would paint. And the person who wants to enjoy that will enjoy that with the script. They won't say, "Arey, but I can't read it." So spend some time, you will be able to read it. Okay, so now this is like you can get this script in maybe a month's practice. It's not very difficult. If you can make these vertical strokes, everything should be fine. There are a few tricky strokes like these, which just with steady pen work, you will be able to make it. But in the meantime, there are other uses of the broad edge pen, which I want to also show you. Going back to the letters that we did last week, now you know how the Roman form works, right? You know how much space is required for all these letters. These Roman letters were written with a broad edge pen. There was a certain measure to the, I guess, the proportion of the letter as well. So you could make potentially a square about 8 to 11 times the size of your pen width. So if we had a pen width of 8 and we draw our square, we can make all the Roman letters with this pen. And the rule is the same, you just have to keep the pen at a particular angle. In this case, the angle is not going to be 45 degrees, it is going to be 15 degrees. And I'll show you how to come to 15 degrees as well. Starting from the top, I'm making, I think I'll make 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because when it becomes too thin, I don't like the letters. And I could theoretically make my square also measuring sideways, but just to save some space and time, I'm going to use a measure of the scale. So this is 24.2. So that's 4.2. This part I think I can make now freehand. So this is a square, pretty much like the square we made last week. Remember this? Cut it across on the diagonal, make a circle, And in this now, using the same pen that we use to mark the scale, we can write our letters. In order to make a 15-degree angle, this is how you can make it. So on this diagonal line, okay, let me explain again. This diagonal line is at 45 degrees, right? So if we were to cut this angle into 3 parts, we should get 15 degrees. So any line that we have drawn from the diagonal going to the right and the base, if we cut that into 3 parts, we get 15 degrees and 30 degrees. So you can keep your pen at this angle and make your letters. This is our letter C. In this, if we want to make the others, you know how to make the medium size. I'm going to choose a different pen to show you. Again at 15 degrees, you can make the letter A. Okay, so you can use the same pen. You don't have to make all these measurements, but maintaining the same angle, we can write our alphabet like this. And even this will give you a lot of interesting letter forms. What you need to keep in mind is that this is not going to be your regular handwriting. So you can't take, sorry, let me look for a paper to show you rough work because I can't do it in this. Yeah, so if you're taking this pen and writing your usual letters like that, it may not be the best option. The least you can do is at least press the whole pen down. So in this now, what are the different effects you can make? If you have 2 pens, you can make shadows by just going over the same shape again. And if you are conversant with the shape, you don't even need to, you'll just go over that same line with great ease. You won't have to worry about where your 3D will come from. Okay, is everyone with me? All right. No questions so far? Okay. Okay, now here's one thing that I can show you. If you take 2 pencils and bind them together, you will be able to make a double line. And this double line can be used to create the shape or a hollow shape of whatever letter you want. So say for example we want to make the letter G. I have to just maintain the angle of the pencils and then just connect these lines, and then I can use this to create a more decorative letter. So I go around the shape like this. And then within this I can create all sorts of designs. So I could create a line that goes through it. So this will give it a more three-dimensional effect. And I could just texture it on one side. And make it look like it is either embossed or engraved. Do you want to try making this? So just,
If you do the two pencils have to be in an angle.
no, they're flat.
Okay. They're just
Yeah, and when you hold them at an angle.
okay. Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to make a scale for this, it's the same thing. You just have to make lines which are left and right like this, and you mark them off, and you know that that's how the scale is. Okay, are you comfortable writing these, holding these pens and making these lines? Then I could probably show you the minuscule alphabet. All right. So I'll do it on the back of the book, maybe, or maybe another sheet will do. Let's try a new sheet altogether. And let's write it on the right hand side. Pari, are you going to do this with us? Because I'm going to start this all over again. I can explain this to you if you want. I'm making the scale on the right hand side now, and I will bring it up to maybe.
Lettering. एकदा तुम्ही जेवायला घ्या. प्रतिमा.
Okay, so I've made a width of about 17 centimeters here, and you can make the scale on the left or right or both. But what I recommend is to mark a margin from the top and the sides a little bit. Do not make it from the edge of the paper. There's a reason why they did not make lettering from the edge of the paper, and actually, it is a very practical concern. They used to leave really wide margins on the side. The reason was that because these manuscripts were made out of vellum, and they were often stored in basements which were very dank. They would attract a lot of rodents. So, very often books would be gnawed at from the side, and every few years they would have to cut the books from the sides and maybe rebind them. So, you do not want to have your beautiful books destroyed by rodents. And that's why we still have margins. Yeah, so I have 2 centimeters from the right, up to about 15 centimeters on the left. I'm using this black pen, which is a 3 mm pen, and this is how you can make your scale. Hold the pen upright and make horizontal lines like this, and if you can see it, fine, but if you can't, keep rotating the paper. And start from the line so that you are sure that you're not overlapping. One single overlap can throw your script off, or an extra gap. If nothing else, this makes such a cute pattern. Yeah, stopping here because I think this should be enough. And now we need to mark our baseline, X line, ascender and descender line. So the scale is like this. From the top you will mark at 2 pen widths the first ascender line. Then after 5 will be 1 base line. So this is your ascender line, X line, base line, and then after 2 pen widths will be the descender line. This is your 1 unit, and then you repeat the same, another 2 for ascender, 5 for X, descender, 2, 5, 2, 2, 5, 2. Now you can do this visually, or you can you can measure the line and do it. That's up to you. If you watch the Peter Jackson documentary, in part 3, he has mentioned how the apprentice would take vellum or stacks of vellum and make holes on the sides through which they would put a string and then score these lines. All right. Okay. So let's start writing these. The first bit you have written I, U, M, N, V, W. So we'll just repeat this one more time. I, U, V. Pari, are you doing this with me? If you need me to slow down, please tell me.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just watching the strokes, how you taking it.
All right. So if you need me
Because
to.
this is something new for me. I've seen it, but I've not done it practically.
Okay, so while you're watching, also ask questions. Like I'm getting these strokes because I'm holding the pen at a 45-degree angle. If
Mhm.
you have a pen handy, just try making a few strokes.
Which is this pen, ma'am? Is this
This is
okay? The calligraphy cut nib, yeah, got
yeah,
it.
this art
Art
line.
line, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we have N, M, okay, the next letter we'll make is R, which is just a diamond, but the diamond can have an entry stroke like that. Then you have a stem with a foot, and then you have half an arch, which is this part, and then with the left edge of the pen, you create a very cute little stroke like this, is a little embellishment. To draw the S, this is quite tricky. You make a zigzag stroke like this, and then create the shape like so. If you don't make these strokes vertical, you'll end up getting a really weird S. We tend to do something like this. Uh, and then it looks like the S is running away from you. So these strokes have to be vertical. And then you have an X which looks like this. Same like R, but it also has a tail. I will share my exemplar of all these so you will be able to see the ductus for all of these. In the next line, we'll make letters which are based on the oval shape. So a little lower than the X line, which is, by the way, over here. This is our baseline. I'm going to make just a short stem and then pull a line to the side. And in the top, I can take a line up like this and pull it down. So my O needs to look like a proper hexagon from the outside. If I were to fill this up, it should look like a hexagon. Then based on this, we have a lot of other letters like the C, and this also can have a very cute flourish coming down, and the E. Sally, are you making this with me or you're just observing? Okay, because if you want me to slow down, just let me know. Normally you are with me, so I'm not asking you.
Yeah, the problem is I have a brush with which I'm doing because I don't have these flat pens.
All right, never
Yeah,
mind.
so yeah.
Even with a brush, you should be able to do it. But if you need me to slow down, just tell me so that you.
No, no, I'm okay. I'm doing it with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now,
Ma'am, I have a question over here.
yes,
The measurements which you have taken,
yes.
are those standard measurements, and why only that measurements have been taken? Like,
So for Gothic scripts, usually the measurements are about 5 pen widths for the X height
mm-hmm,
because these letters are rather short and very concise. In fact, this extra space that we have for ascender, descender, that would also probably just be one space.
mm-hmm,
Again, the reason for that is the script was designed in a time when you didn't have paper and
mm-hmm,
everything was written on vellum, and vellum was very expensive. So
mm-hmm,
you had to find a way to write stuff very, very tight, close to each other, but still
mm-hmm.
make it look beautiful. You might find scripts which have a 4 pen width or a 6 pen width,
Mm-hmm.
but mostly they are 5, 5.5. That is what I've found.
And this is 3, right?
This is 5. So count these. What I'm counting are these pen widths. So just to give you an idea, a pen width is the width of the flatness of my pen. And I
Mm-hmm.
have made these one below the other so I can count the height of the space. This is 2 pen widths, 1, 2.
Mm-hmm.
This is 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
That is the X height, which is the height in at which I'm going to write the minuscule letters. Okay, and above this is ascender space, below this is descender space, and this is the baseline. Like I said, this is the baseline here, this is the X line, and the space in between is your X height with ascender space above, descender space below.
The ascender and descender are 2 pen widths, right?
They're 2 pen widths, correct?
Okay, got it.
All right. Okay, now the A is a very complex letter over here. One might think that just put a little tail over here and get it over with, but no, that is not how the Gothics did it. So for the A, we will make the bottom part with a shorter stem. This is much shorter than I started for the O, C, and E. And then imagining where the top would come, I make a shape like this. So this is like a blank A, and with again the left tip of my pen I can pull a line inside from both top and the middle to make this very elegant A. I think I can make even a shorter stem and show you. It's a beautiful letter. Alright, now we'll do an ascender shape. So the ascender stem in this particular lettering, this particular style was written like this. You made a stem like this, which ended with a diamond at the bottom, but on the top, just above the X height, you took the left tip of your pen and created this tiny wedge shape. So all the ascenders had this shape. Oh, this has become too. This is our L. For the H, we just make an arch like we made for N and M and pull it down and a much longer foot. For the B, a much longer foot right here and an arch that comes down and joins the foot. So I want you to know this. The two strokes that we make are often next to each other. Like for the O, if I make a stroke like this, notice how the tops are already at a particular angle. This is the angle, here this is the angle. They're going to be at 45 degrees. So the next stroke that you make does not have to touch the previous stroke at all. If you maintain the angle, it will look like it's continuing. And this next stroke just comes and sits right next to the previous stroke. And if the angles are accurate, it will fill up the space. So don't be bothered about connecting them. Don't come and touch them. You don't need to unless you feel that there's too much of a gap, but then touch them only by bringing a line at the 45-degree angle. Now the last one, K, is a little tricky. For the K, you can make an arch like this, exactly like we made for the H, but you bring a line down diagonally at 45, then go out horizontally, and then you can do this very cute extension by just lifting the pen slightly as you bring the leg of the K down. These are just stylistic variations that you will find, and again, because this font or this I'll be killed by the community if I call it font. This script is written by hand. You'll find a lot of such variations based on the scribe's preferences. Alright, so LHBK. Then let's move on to the descenders. The first descender we will make will be the J. It will just come down like this, where you just take the nib a little to the side and lift it from the right so that you get a very thin line coming down. If you do not lift it, then you will get something like this. We'll take this down and you will do this. So we do not want like a flat edge over there. You just want a sharp, almost like a sword or knife edge. Then for the P, you make the same stroke again, but this time you use the right side of the pen to make a wedge on the right hand side. Oh, this has turned out horrible, so I'm going to make it again. Lift the pen, make a wedge, and then make the same shape that we did for the N, but don't make a foot. You will make this shape and come and seat it right next to the earlier shape. See, this is why I told you that you should not bother about overlapping the strokes. We want this nice sharp shape between the two strokes. And I think we can do without this wedge also. It's becoming too busy there. So I'm just going to do this. Yeah, this looks much cleaner. We can make this for Q, which will be like the O, and a little wedge on the right. I think on the Q the wedge looks much better. On the P, not really nice, because there's this stroke that's coming to the right as well, spoiling everything. Then we have the letter G. Same start as the O, Q. In fact, you can make an O like so, with a little extra ear showing out on the top right. And now I want you to see this construction. This is very elegant. Where the two strokes from the bottom and the right join, right in the middle of that, you will make a very slight S shape like this. Okay, and then you will bring a line down on the same angle, and the stroke that we made for P, you will make that. I'll make it one more time. This is much better because I got a nice hollow shape at the base. Now since we are making these curly lines, there's one ascender that we have to make here, which is the letter D. So for the D, again the strokes are the same as the O. But for the line that comes from the top, this is how you do it. I want you to just observe this. Where you started the first stroke, keep your pen right above that and then carry a line slightly above. Don't go all the way to the top. The D is a very short ascender. So from just above there, you will draw a line that goes sideways and down like that. So maintain that 45-degree angle and you will get a nice sharp edge also there. And right next to D, or maybe above this, I'll show you how to make the T, which is also a short ascender. So you start this stroke just above the X line, but not all the way to the ascender line. And bring it straight down. It's a long stem. Make its foot. And then you make the crossbar just below the X line. So see, their position is very important, so that when you draw this crossbar sideways, you get a nice closed triangle on the left. So what you do not want to do is make the T so tall that when you make the crossbar, there's such a big negative space over here. You do not want that. You want to make it just enough to accommodate the crossbar. It needs to not have this extra triangular space. So that's our T. Moving on, the letter Y. So Y can be made somewhat like the G, or you can just make it plain and simple like the P or J. Maybe if you want a flourish like that is good enough. And then we'll end it with a very simple Z. There are Zs which have these kind of descenders, but thankfully we don't use the Z so much, so we'll make do with this simple one. So let's see, we've got A, B, C, D, E, F, always the last one. So the F is nothing but a very tall stem with an ear and a crossbar like the T at the same spot as the T. Oh, it's become so wobbly. Yeah, this is much better. F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Done.